Thank you very much, Ligia, and you've reiterated a very important point that was made as a common message to all of the interventions so far, is really the partnership that we all should have, and particularly being member state, being organization, being civil society representative. It is important that we all take stock of the challenges ahead of us and that we try to work together. And that really leads us to the intervention of the last panelist, but certainly not the least, of this session, Mr. Abdul Tejan-Cole from the African Center of Excellence, Access to Justice, an issue that was mentioned by several speakers before, board member, Transparency, Accountability and Participation Network. So looking at working together with all SDG 16 stakeholders, so government, civil society, UN agency work, how do you see and how do you envisage in terms of partnership, how can we better work together to really achieve tangible and impactful solution to address some of the challenges that we've highlighted during this afternoon? Another very challenging question. I'm very sorry, Abdul. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think probably just start off by saying you said that we should always try and take stock. Civil society organizations, actually, with those of us who are within the SDG 16 Now campaign, actually took stock of the SDG, where we are at in our halfway to 2030 report. And as has already been mentioned by the UNDP rep, the results that we're getting have been damning. The results have not been very good. They've not been very progressive. We found out in our halfway house report that none of the 12 targets for SDG 16 are on pace. There's only a handful of those indicators that I think only 2, birth registration and national human rights institutions, that show sign of progress. 5 on peace and violence, children, rule of law, and access to justice, fundamental freedoms and discrimination are regressing. And with another 5, there's been absolutely no progress. So the signs, in terms of progress, the signs don't look good. And I think there's a general sense of maybe pessimism or negativity. But my sense here really is to say there's hope. And there's really hope. And I don't think here's a time for us to despair. I don't think this is a time for us to be negative. I think for me, this is in fact what the halfway house report to the 2030 report showed us, is that this is a call for action. This is a time for action. This is a time for us to celebrate the small progress we've made, but also to acknowledge the challenges and to commit that we're going to do more to ensure that the SDG 20, particularly SDG 16, is not a dream, but it actually becomes a reality. And there's a key example that I want to cite, Chair, to address your question in terms of what can be done. And the example I cite, last year I was in Nairobi, Kenya, and I had the pleasure of witnessing a very key project that's taking place in Kenya. It's called the Alternative Justice System Mechanism. And that Alternative Justice System Mechanism ideally brings together the judiciary of Kenya, taking the lead. And I mentioned with emphasis judiciary. I'm a lawyer by background, I'm a lawyer by training, and I know how hard it is to get judges to work with civil society. And I know how difficult it is to bring judges, particularly those who are trained in the English common law tradition, who have very little linkages with civil society. But in Kenya, through this alternative justice system mechanism, civil society is working together with the judiciary. And this project, Chair, you'll be pleased to hear, is actually supported by UNODC, by UNDP, by the European Union. And they're working together with academics, with it's a multi-stakeholder collaboration. It's a kind of collaboration which one of our colleagues with Kitoyo Washaria, the organization that we work with in Kenya, Annette, Dr. Mbogo, says that the kind of partnership defies the normal norms of collaboration because it's so unique, it's so together, and it's making a significant number of impact in the sense that it is reducing the burden on the formal courts. It is having a drastic impact on the burden in terms of overloading. And it is also bridging the gap between the informal and the formal justice system. In many of our countries, in my own country where I come from, Sierra Leone, it's estimated about 75% of the people in Sierra Leone do not go and seek access to justice in the formal courts. they go to the informal justice system. So there's a need to bridge that gap between the formal and the informal. And the judiciary in Kenya is taking a lead through this alternative justice system. It's actually bringing together the informal and the informal and making sure that there's a collaborative effort for these organizations, for these institutions to work together. And Madam Chair, I think that's the path, that's the way forward. That, for me, is the direction forward. That is the key way forward, and I think for me, that's how, if we want to ensure that SDG 16 is fully implemented, it is that kind of collaboration that we need. I agree 100% with what Ambassador Donoghue mentioned about the universality of SDG 16. I'm not going to belabor that. I consider SDG 16 as the mother of all SDGs because of its the role it plays and the key linkages it has with all the other SDGs. Most of the time, when I practice as a lawyer in Sierra Leone, most of the cases that clog the courts, that clogs the courts in our country were land cases. But you do not see them as land cases. You see them as wounding or assault or battery. But they're actually as a result of land disputes. So if we go back to the whole question of dealing with the whole question of land, and you see the linkages, it will help the justice system, access to justice system. So that linkage between SDG 16 and all the other SDGs, I think, is really crucial. So my final message, Madam Chair, is that partnership is crucial. But from a civil society perspective, this afternoon I went to a session at the Baha'i International Center where somebody said, and we're using the Chatham House rules, so I can't quote the person, but somebody said that the partnership has to be genuine. In many of our societies in Africa, and I'm sure in many parts of the world, there's a general distrust between government and civil society. There's a general notion that government and civil society cannot work together. There's a general distrust, particularly on the side of government. I speak for civil society perspective, so although I was once in government, but there's a general distrust that we cannot work together and we cannot collaborate. The alternative justice system scheme in Kenya shows the contrary. We can collaborate together. We can work together. We can ensure that no one is left behind. And it is only through that collaboration that I believe that we can be able to challenge SDG 16. So I emphasize the point that had been made earlier about partnerships, and I think it's really important that the spaces that are closing for civil society in many of our countries, those spaces are open, that the distrust ends, and that governments and civil society have genuine partnership to work together to ensure that we meet SDG 16, because if we satisfy SDG 16, we'll be satisfying so many other SDGs. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Abdul, for this yet again another strong advocacy of partnership. And I think let's reiterate so often that SDG 16 links to so many of the other SDGs, and of course with SDG 17 on partnership. But we've seen the link with so many of other topics that are covered in the other SDGs.